Okay, as I told before, today we have the topic best practice for process and discrete manufacturing. So we've created some slides for it. Before we start, maybe some words to me. So my name is Tim Werle from Boyum IT, working there as a senior business consultant, and I'm working in the area of Beas manufacturing. And yeah, I will. My idea today, our idea today, is to give you an idea of typical process for process manufacturing and discrete manufacturing. We have there some slides I want to show you, which gives you a guideline, which gives you some help in the case of course, if you start to have some sales or pre-sales, if you have some prospects. But of course also if you go into deeper discussions when you start to implement. You can see here the first step, and I wanted to show you the first step, some slides to process manufacturing and later then to discrete manufacturing. You can see here a small agenda with my topics I have. So we have here some slides to regarding the typical landscape. Landscape means some possible third-party software systems, some machinery outside SAP and Beas. We have then we'll show you some typical functions and process for process manufacturing. I give you then some process examples, or some examples we know coming from process manufacturing, and based on that also some product structure examples. So you know maybe all the item structures, and based on that we have some examples. And then also important always is the planning itself, the planning process. Maybe you know APS, where you can start some planning of your production. Also here we have some ideas and slides, and at the end some additional informations special for process manufacturing. When we start with the first slide, typical system landscape, maybe you know that you have of course then an SAP and Beas running, but you have then sometimes the requirement to have different external software, or you have here, for example, some machinery, some machines. You have to, for example, you need the interface. That can be typical that you have some badges for it, or you have some times or material quantities you want to do to make some interface. And for this, you know, maybe, or we have the Beas Data Integration Hub. This is a standard module, a standard function inside Beas, and with that you have the option to generate some interfaces. So for example, the machines your customer has some software which gives you some files, for example XML file or CSV file. And with the Beas Data Integration Hub you have some scenarios, some objects where you can use and map it against some files coming from a machine, and doing, for example, some material issue or doing some time receipt. This is one example. On the other side, we have in process manufacturing, of course, also the requirement of formulation administration. That can be also an external or third-party software the customer is using. And also here it's possible to have an interface, for example, that the customer do this administration of your formulations of the recipes outside and give the information then to the system, and you have it then inside SAP and Beas as a normal bill of material. And then also quality management, of course, if there are some external quality management system, or sometimes it calls labor information and management system. Also here we have very often the requirement that they do some quality control of lots of batches, and the results should go to the system. And also here you can use the Beas Data Integration Hub. Yeah, this is often a requirement, and here the slide shows only the options and the option to use then the Beas Data Integration Hub. Of course, for this we have some additional videos, documentation, how to use it. Yeah, then next, this slide here comes then to the process or to the functions. So our idea is to give you here an guideline on a rough level. On the right side, you see here the areas we have, or the modules or the functions. You have a general product management. You have then later the material management itself. You have then instead manufacturing management and maybe in service management. And our idea in this matrix is to say, okay, there are different functions and processes we have in the system, and you have different industries inside process manufacturing. We said, okay, it can be a chemical industry, it can be personal care, or it can be pharmaceutical. So, but all have different requirements, normally process manufacturing. And then there are here idea of functions. For example, the formulation administration we can have, for example, or we have always, or normally at chemicals, but maybe not at personal care, because personal care don't have maybe special recipes. They maybe only purchase some ingredients and do some mixings. And in pharmaceutical, we have it. So it's here the idea to see and to check together, maybe also with the customer or based on requirements, which functions we have, which functions are necessary. Of course, here on a rough level. So we have then, if we go to the through the functions, the data integration hub as a tool for the interface, and also here it's only an idea, of course, but we see this more in chemicals because you have maybe external software, and we see it more in pharmaceutical, but not in personal care. Of course, you can have it also in personal care, but we see it more in chemicals and pharmaceuticals. Product structure is something you have always. So the product structure means all behind your master data, bill of materials, and also, of course, operations, resource structures, the master data itself. And of course, you have always the situation that you have to discuss and to speak about product structure. Then the version control. The version control is something special where we say, okay, it's normally maybe only more interesting in personal care, because maybe in personal care you have comes to the point where you have some materials, ingredients which runs out and will be new, and then at that point, at a certain point, you need a new version of your product, and then you need the version control. Whereas in chemicals and pharmaceutical, you do more or less the version control maybe outside in your external formulation administration software. And then at the end, in product management, we have also the big topic calculation. I have here the batch because it's not the typical calculation based on a quote in this case, because normally in these industries, you work with standard products. So you don't have to calculate in the quote. It's more than here the idea to calculate the product itself, the pre-calculation based on one product, or in a batch run based on more than one, on several products, starting a batch calculation and get, for example, some cost of goods sold or some price for a price list. This is the product management. In material management, we have three functions, three process. We have, of course, always MRP. You know MRP. Normally the people use MRP and will purchase, for example, based on the MRP run. We have here the good receipt PO. This is something you can use, the good receipt PO in Beas, for example. I know, for example, in chemicals, when they do the good receipt, it can be that you have here, for example, a good receipt PO with some special pallets or with some special size. So you can do then the good receipt based on that. And also what we also have is then the quality control and batch release may be based on a good receipt PO. So we can, based on a good receipt PO, you can create the batch and generate a quality control order and check this and release your batch. This is then material management itself. Sorry. And what we also have, then we have the manufacturing management itself, and the manufacturing management of manufacturing planning. We have here always, then we have then a material reservation, maybe based on manufacturing planning, so that you can do some reservation based on that. Maybe we don't have it in personal care and pharmaceutical. The manufacturing release itself, it's always necessary. And then typical for the process manufacturing is a mixed process, so that you have always a mixed process. You mix your ingredients always. And in-process control means you have some quality control inside your manufacturing. This is and then that you have connect some quality control orders to your operations. This is typical maybe more for chemicals and personal care. And then you have a filling process where you do some filling, some packing, and then at the end the quality control, where we said, okay, quality control at the end is then more pharmaceutical, because in chemical and personal care you do it inside your production, more in here in the in-process control. And at the end there are some service management. We mean with service management, for example, internal maintenance, so maintenance of your machines, for example. When you have in chemicals some bigger machines or plants, you have to plan them internal maintenance. There can be a claim management, and of course always the topic batch traceability. You have the function in Beas to have your complete traceability through your batches you used in the production. Okay. These are the functional process on a rough level. So if we go to the next slide, this is then a step more that you now build your business process. So here this idea to say, okay, what are the functions we need? For example, here, typical for chemicals, chemical industry. And then we can say, okay, we build the process. For example, in production management, we have this functionalities we need. We don't have the version control, therefore you have here the other color. And then you have here a kind of flow or process you have, so that you can with your customer define still on a rough level the process. For example, here the manufacturing management, you see the steps and the process. And in chemicals, you don't need the packing and finishing, and don't need at the end the quality release and the batch. Therefore, you have here the different color. So this is then goes more to the business process itself, and then in the next step here, this slide should then support you or give you idea then of the item of the product structure. So now we have a scenario. So we have, for example, here the first example and scenario that we say we have a standard product in several containers for different end users. And we assume that we will mixing and filling both together directly into sales product without a labeling at the end. And the last step is then a special labeling. So, and based on this scenario, you see on the left side the structure. So it means we have the finished product, what we have here, standard product, the final product. The finished product, if you can see here, has at the end only the pick and pack and the labeling. For the finished product, we have the stock product or the mix product. We mix. So that means for this stock or product, we have as operation the mixing and filling. So both together in this scenario, we mix and fill. Can be a big machine or plant to do this together. And we will of course have this stock related, means we will save this on stock. And then a special thing here is that we need for our mixed product or stock product a recipe. So, and the recipe itself has the ingredients. This is one thing. will be managed inside the system or coming maybe from an external system by using Data Integration Hub. And the receipt itself, you see it here on the right side, the structure, the receipt itself is a phantom item. So and with phantom item means, and you see here the advantage, phantom item means we can manage in the structure our ingredients, but later at the point we produce, we will eliminate the phantom items and all ingredients will also automatically assigned to our stock product. So later we will of course not produce the receipt itself. It's only for the management administration. The advantage here is that we can have the receipt in one receipt in different stock product. And if we change something in the receipt, we have automatically, of course, the change in all related stock products. So this is here, you see our example. On the right side, here you see some information for the breakdown. Means the work order for final product can coming directly from sales order or maybe from MRP. This is different, of course, how you will create the work order for the finished product. And the mixed product will generally be managed by some minimum stock, maybe by considering the lot size you have, or maybe based on some forecast. And the creating of the work order for the mixed product will be done normally by MRP or the order recommendation. This is also here some information to the scenario. But this is our example one. You can have a typical example you can have in process manufacturing. Then if we go one step more, and now a slide, we come more deeper in the process. That means then based on this example, we have here the process example one. This is based on our item structure example. That can mean that we have, based on our example, of course, a sales here. We have later the planning, we have the purchase, the quality control, the manufacturing itself, and some logistics. This we have always this in the process. And then if you see the process, you have the sales order coming from normally from SAP, of course. Sales order oriented, you will create then maybe the work order for the packing, simply the packing at the end or the labeling. The work order for the packing, we can plan here in a planning scenario so that we get some start dates for the packing. Based on this planning, we will start MRP or parallel start MRP, the MRP run, and MRP run will gives us some order recommendation. And based on the order recommendation, we create the work order for the mixing and filling. So maybe you can remember the mixing and filling is done in one step, but this is a special stock-related work order. And of course, what we can also do then is to take this new created work order for the mixing and filling and go into a second planning scenario. You can do that by APS and plan more resource-based on capacity, the planning and the mixing and filling of the mixed product. So and then in parallel, what you also have in parallel is, of course, that you start your normal purchase order based on MRP, and that goes, of course, then later to the good receipt of PO. I think this is clear. And based on the planned mixing and filling work order or work order for a mixed product, you go into the manufacturing or the production. So you have the order, you mix, and now comes a scenario you can have in process manufacturing that you have during your production, your IPC or in process control means you generate maybe some batch with some quality control order, and this quality control order is checked here, and it can be that you have to do some adjustments of your batch here of your quality control order, and after the adjustment or changing, you get then the release of the batch. So this is the in-process control during your production. And then you have the batch itself, and you use then the batch of your mixed product to fill and later to pack and release for shipping and then the shipping. So this can be here the process for our process example one here at the end. And of course, you can use these slides. It's quite a good slide to use to discuss on this level with your customer the requirements and the possible process. When we go one step more, there comes then a slide which describes a possible planning scenario. This is then more planning. This is then using APS, for example, and MRP. And here we try to give you an idea how the planning process, the steps can be. And at the beginning, of course, we have, again, the order creation, the creation based on sales order maybe of our work order for packing or using MRP. So it depends on what the customer wants. And the created work order, you can plan here in APS in the first planning scenario. So planning scenario, especially for the work order, for the packing, for the finished product. And you make here, for example, a backwards planning to get a start date. And based on that, you have then MRP, the MRP run, and then you get some order recommendation to generate for your raw materials purchase order, but also to summarize quantities and maybe then to generate for your mixed product your work order. And this work order for your mixed product goes to a second APS planning scenario you can set up, where you do then a more setup time optimized or resource based forward planning against the finite capacity to get then the dates to mixing and filling for your work orders. And that step more here, as a result, you get then a work order list or job list. You can use the function pool list, where you see then your planned order. And of course, if you change then afterwards, you have again here an MRP, an impact. And if you change start dates, it can be, therefore you see here the step back, can be that you have then a new planning or changing where you can start again the planning scenario. As a result, on the right side, you see then as a result in your pool list or in your work order list, the planned released work order for mixing and filling, and of course later then for the packing. This is here an idea of discussing and generating some planning scenarios. Yeah, and then a second example, you see again the structure, the item structure. The difference here is that we have here no phantom item, no recipe itself. The difference here is that we, and this is here on the right side, explain the scenario that we have a bulk or batch where we have different containers with different sizes. And the difference is that we first mix something here in an assembly, and then fill it into a bulk. We call it bulk, or fill it into defined containers, and have it then on warehouse. And at the end, then this is then an additional step. At the end, that comes then the filling and labeling. So the filling is then an additional step. So we have here simply one step more, or more deeper structure. Something special here is that we have here the mixed product related to our bulk product, and what this is here described, we set an option always break down. That means this is normally the mixed product is a stock related item, but with the option in your bill of material list, always break down. The system will always, and this is described here, always create the mixed product together with your bulk product, with this product. So as soon as you create your bulk, the system will automatically also create the mixed product in the same work order. This is simply a different scenario or a variant of scenario one. You see here some advantages. In this case, you can split the mixing and the filling. In example one, we have this together, and then maybe you can. It's more flexible to use the production of the resource. The disadvantage here is that this is described here. The splitting of the production process needs maybe needs here or special resource. You have to check if this is possible at the customer side. And also here, when we go to the process example, it looks a little bit different. You see here we have, of course, also our sales order. We have then the work order for the filling and the labeling. We will plan this work order, go to MRP, and then create the work order for the mixing, and with the mixing together also the filling. So this is this always breakdown flag that we create mixing and filling in one step. And then, but then it's the same. We're planning the mixing and the filling. We start the mixing, have maybe also here the quality control, the release of the batch, and then later comes the filling and the labeling and the release of the shipping at the end. This is simply a little bit a different process on a different item structure. And also here, if we take a look on the planning side, it's more or less the same. You have also here your order creation. You will plan your filling and labeling for your finished product. You go to MRP. You create your mixed product based on your lot size, and then you have a second scenario where you plan the mixing and filling in your containers. This is based on your lot size. Yeah, and then at the end you have the preparation and MRP maybe again, and your workload. This is then more or less the same. Additional to this process, we have here a slide, and this is then an idea from our side where we give you some information. This can be some functions, some process, some description of special wording. For example, what we have, some typical things is, for example, the material reservation. The material reservation, there's a text which describes, it can be that some special batches comes per interface from a machine, that you have an interface by a data integration hub, that you don't have to do the reservation inside the system, that you have an interface, and the interface, the machine which is mixing, knows which batch is used and gives you the information by interface. But it can also be that you don't have any integration of external machines, that you have the option here, for example, to do some upfront reservation. It's possible to use a reservation function for work orders, that you say, okay, before I start to produce, I do a reservation of my batch numbers, and later if you do the material issue, the system takes exactly this reserved material automatically in the background. This can be one thing. And our idea is to generate then some videos which describes this process, some short videos. For example, here we've already created some video. There's a link to YouTube where you can see the function that you assign your batch from your mixed product later to your finished product. Sometimes there is a requirement that in process manufacturing, people say, okay, if I produce my batch in my mixed product, I want to have the same batch in my final product. And there's a function which allows this to do that automatically. And for this, we have, for example, a YouTube video. So you see here, top tip video means we want to create in future more and more short videos, documentation, to give some idea and explanation of these special functions and process. Also permissions. This is something that customer wants special permissions on the recipes. So it can be that the people inside the company don't have the permissions to see the recipes. Also here there are some extended Beas functionalities to set here permissions on bill of materials. And then here some more things. Some explanations. We spoke very often, of course, in process manufacturing about batches, about batch size, about recipes, a recipe development. Here's some explanation to recipe development. And then one last thing, we have here some video on YouTube, quite new from some days, which gives an idea and 1 hour demonstration, 1 hour presentation of a typical process manufacturing process with Beas. It's a 1-hour YouTube video. Yeah, feel free if you have time to check this video and get an idea how to do then really a presentation with Beas when you have a process manufacturing industry you want to show. Okay, these are some slides for process manufacturing, and now we have, of course, the same for discrete manufacturing. So our idea is to give you also some slides when we speak about discrete manufacturing. So I also want to show you, not so deep like I did before, but give you an idea what that means for discrete manufacturing. We have also here, of course, the topics, the short, more or less the same like in process manufacturing. And if we go here through the slides, we have also here the typical system landscape. But here, when we talk about discrete manufacturing, we have different things. We speak maybe more about some PDM systems, some CAD systems. Here you have maybe the requirement to import some bill of material. We have some machine data collections we want to connect, but at the end, it's the same. You have the Beas Data Integration Hub. You have more or less same scenario like we have in process manufacturing, of course, with different requirements, different wording. But also here, we have the typical system landscape. And also here, we think about, okay, what can be the typical functions? What can be the functions when we talk about discrete manufacturing, when we talk about metal industry, for example, plant manufacturing, or medical device. So also here you see the functions. I will not go through it again, but you see more or less same functions or different things. Can be a little bit different, especially when we take a look on manufacturing management. We have, of course, not the typical mixing and filling process. We have different process. We have, for example, external manufacturing. We have here maybe a forecast planning and something. And if you go to service management, we have maybe a tool administration. Yeah. So, but also here on a rough level, an idea what we need for metal industry, for different industries, or what we maybe not need. And also here, we then start to build our process. In this case, will be the metal industry an example. And for the metal industry, you also see here which functions you need or maybe not need. But it's also here again the idea to building the business process. And if we go one step more, also here we did some examples. But here it's more the idea to say, okay, you can have a structure which is maybe a typical make-to-stock process, which is maybe a typical one-level structure, really simple. It's maybe metal industry. The structure is simple, of course, maybe not the process, but it's maybe one finished product. A make-to-stock can be also a make-to-order. You have your bill of materials. You have your operations. You have not a second level, not additional assembly, and then also here some short description of a possible scenario. You see it here. For example, MRP2 can be some scenario. MRP2 means you get then a long-time capacity planning based on your forecast. If your customer has some forecast, you have maybe here very often some work with standard products and so on and so on. Also here's an example, and also here based on the example, we can have then the process example for make to stock. Looks of course different to a process manufacturing. You can have here sales order, but also forecast in the sales. You will not create a work order based on sales order. It's more to start MRP, and based on forecast or existing sales order, you create your work order for the finished product. Then you start the planning of your finished product. You do your purchasing, you do your good receipt. Maybe based on the good receipt, you have some quality control for your material you purchased. And on the other side, you plan your finished product, maybe also with APS, and then start production, release your batch, packing, release the shipping, and then the shipping. That can be the scenario. Yeah, and also here, of course, if you work with the planning with APS, also here there is yeah, possible planning scenario. It's then more simple because you have only maybe one planning scenario in APS. You plan also only the finished product without any sub-assemblies. You have also MRP, and then as a result, your workload. Yeah, and then here a second example can be the make-to-order mixed mode. We call it make-to-order mixed mode. It's also very common very often that you have a finished product, and then under your finished product you have a stock related assembly. It's an assembly stock related, so 2-level. Then comes your operations, and the idea is, the scenario is here that you create your finished product, maybe sales oriented, and then you create your summarized quantities and create your assembly more stock related. And if we take a look here on our process, you see sales order oriented, your finished product work order, and the planning, and based on MRP you get here the work order for your assembly. You can plan your assembly, and then it goes to the production. This is then different, of course, to example 1, because you have then, of course, also some additional separate work order for your assembly. And the planning scenario to it, again, yeah, it's then here the difference that you plan your finished product, and in a second APS scenario you can plan your sub-assemblies then. And the last scenario you can have is then the engineer to order scenario. If you have maybe some finished product which are individual, maybe you have only a kind of template. Maybe you always create some new products. You have more different sub-assemblies which are order related. If you have, for example, a big machine you want to produce, and here's a difference that you can have, for example, upfront in your sales, maybe a configuration, if you work with a configurator, or you can have a calculation, simply a calculation based on your dummy items you use. Or also here, of course, can be a scenario that you have a PDM system external, or a CAD system where you have an interface, or you have maybe a construction which creates some bill of materials, and you need here maybe some interface to import your bill of materials, so that you not created your manual, but that this comes from an external system. And also here you can use, of course, the data integration hub for this. If we take a look here on the process, yeah, it can be that you have a kind of engineering. It can be that you create your work order then coming from calculation or sales order. You plan your work order, you generate your production work order, but it can be that you have a kind of engineering. You use maybe a data integration hub, and you can change afterwards your production, or you can change your existing work order for the finished product and make an update to the existing production. This can be here a typical engineer to order process. Looks, of course, then also different to the example 1 or 2. Yeah. Also here, of course, the planning scenario, which have then the planning of the finished product, and because you create all your sub-assembly together with the finished product order related, you have also only here one planning scenario. Also here, one special thing is that you maybe not work with MRP, that you more here work with your material requirement list, because customers say, okay, I want to purchase my material order related. It makes no sense to use MRP. It makes more sense to get a material requirement list based on your finished product, on your existing work order, and then you can create purchase order directly from your material requirement list. This is also a function and an option in Beas. I'm not sure if you know it, that you can do that without using MRP. So it's then, order related purchasing in that case. Yeah. That's it. These are some slides, some ideas we want to give you, again, a guideline, an idea to if you have some requirements, if you start to do some pre-sales, if you start to think about to use Beas for different industry, for different process, and this should of course give you help.